The final revelation is profound yet deceptively simple. The shadow is not something to vanquish. It is a companion, a mirror, a teacher, and a source of life. Your true liberation begins when you stop running from it and start engaging with it. When you stop condemning the parts of yourself that society tells you are unworthy, and instead bring them into consciousness. When this truth takes hold, everything changes. The guilt that has weighed on you dissolves into understanding. The shame that has haunted you becomes fuel for growth. The fear that has paralyzed you transforms into courage, and the life you once thought was controlled by fate, circumstance, or hidden forces becomes a co-created journey, a dialogue between your conscious self and the depths of your psyche. Imagine walking through the world fully awake, unmasked, and whole. The shadows you once feared are now companions on your path. You are no longer a puppet of unconscious forces, but a conscious agent of your own destiny. Every choice is informed by awareness. Every action is grounded in authenticity. The chaos of life becomes a landscape for exploration, rather than a battlefield for survival. This is the ultimate truth of the shadow. It is not your curse, but your liberation. It is the force that has haunted you not to harm you, but to guide you to wholeness. The darkness you feared is the soil from which your true self can grow. The fire that terrifies you is the crucible in which your consciousness is forged. The shadow is the path, the teacher, and the treasure all at once. And so, the final question arises. Will you continue to live haunted, divided, and constrained by what you refuse to see? Or will you step forward, open the door, and meet yourself in the full spectrum of your being? Because the shadow waits for no one, and when you finally embrace it, you will discover something undeniable, immutable, and eternal, that the deepest fear, the hidden shame, and the suppressed desire were never enemies. They were your liberation all along. Consider Nietzsche's idea of self-overcoming. The individual must confront their limitations, contradictions, and inner chaos, not to destroy them, but to rise above their previous self. Self-overcoming is not denial. It is the conscious negotiation with the shadow, turning its raw power into strength, insight, and creativity. The anger that once consumed becomes the energy to create. The fear that once paralyzed becomes a compass for growth. The envy that once poisoned becomes a teacher of desire and aspiration. Historical figures who embraced shadow work provide examples of its transformative potential. Viktor Frankl, enduring the horrors of concentration camps, discovered that suffering could become a vehicle for meaning when met with conscious choice. Dostoevsky, through the labyrinth of his own moral struggles, revealed how confronting inner darkness is the path to empathy and depth. Jung himself emphasized that those who refuse shadow integration live fragmented lives, at war with themselves and others, perpetually haunted by projections they cannot recognize. The rebellion is not about perfection, it is about authenticity. It is not about eradicating darkness, but illuminating it. You may stumble, regress, or feel consumed by the shadow's intensity. That is inevitable. Growth demands risk, discomfort, and vulnerability. But each encounter with the shadow enlarges your consciousness, strengthens your emotional resilience, and deepens your understanding of life's paradoxes. In practical terms, the rebellion begins with attention. Observe your triggers. Examine your projections. Listen to recurring dreams, impulses, and emotional surges. Journal without censorship. Engage in therapy, meditation, or dialogue with those who challenge your assumptions. Allow yourself to experience emotion fully, rather than numbing or rationalizing it away. Shadow work requires courage, patience, and discipline. But it is the most potent form of self-liberation, and yet, even as you rebel inwardly, society resists. The collective shadow fights back through norms, pressures, and ridicule. Those who challenge themselves often encounter suspicion, judgment, or alienation, but the individual who who persists discovers that liberation is not solitary, it radiates. Shadow integration reshapes relationships, creativity, and leadership. It transforms not only the person, but the environment they inhabit. Imagine the power of a person who has claimed their shadow. They are neither easily manipulated nor blindly obedient. They act from depth rather than impulse, from awareness rather than fear. Their presence disrupts the illusions of others, revealing the masks that everyone wears. And paradoxically, in embracing their darkness, they illuminate the world. This rebellion is radical because it challenges everything you thought about yourself. It asks you to question the virtues you've relied upon, the fears you've justified, the moral certainties you've clung to. It demands that you take full responsibility for your inner world and, consequently, your outer life. There is no halfway. Either you step forward into the abyss of your own psyche or remain haunted forever by the shadows you refuse to see. The reward, however, is profound. Freedom does not mean comfort. It does not mean safety. It means wholeness. It means living in alignment with the full spectrum of your being, where light and dark coexist, where instincts and reason harmonize, where self-deception falls away and authenticity reigns. To rebel against the shadow is to reclaim your soul. It is the act of saying to the universe, I will no longer be divided. I will meet my darkness and emerge complete. And once you take this first step, the final truth becomes visible, a revelation so simple, yet so transformative, that all previous struggles appear as preparation for this moment. Imagine standing at the edge of a vast canyon. The wind whips around you, and in its echo, you hear the voices of every fragment of yourself. You've hidden every fear, every desire, every failure. You could turn away. You could retreat to the safety of the familiar. But something within you knows that the abyss is not emptiness. It is truth. It is the place where light and dark merge, where the entirety of your being waits to be claimed. The ultimate realization of shadow work is both terrifying and liberating. The part of yourself you have feared most is not your enemy. It is the wellspring of your authenticity, the source of your creativity, the key to freedom. The shadow is not an external force acting upon you, it is you. Every judgment you cast outward is a mirror of inner denial. Every impulse you resist is energy begging for recognition. Every projection is an untold story, waiting for acknowledgement. To understand this fully, you must embrace a paradox. The qualities you reject are precisely those that hold the potential for your greatest growth. Anger, when acknowledged, teaches boundaries. Fear, when faced, reveals courage. Desire, when understood, ignites purpose. The shadow is simultaneously your darkness and your guide. It is the unseen hand shaping your destiny, and the forgotten path leading to wholeness. Jung insisted that only by confronting the shadow can one achieve individuation, the full realization of the self. Individuation is not a reward. It is a responsibility. It is a process of integrating all parts of the psyche, of recognizing that you are not merely the persona you present, but the sum of light and shadow, order and chaos, conscious thought and unconscious depth. To live without integration is to drift, haunted by invisible currents you do not understand. Consider the implications. Every conflict, every inner struggle, every sense of emptiness is not a punishment, but a call. The shadow does not attack you. It communicates. It signals what you have denied, what you have suppressed, what you have refused to love in yourself. And paradoxically, the very act of recognition diminishes its power. By shining consciousness upon it, the shadow transforms from tormentor to teacher. This is why Jung declared, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The truth of your being is not in sanitized virtue or in external accolades. It is in the fearless acknowledgement of what you have hidden. The liberation of the psyche is inseparable from the embrace of the shadow. But here lies another paradox, one that challenges everything society tells you. The shadow does not vanish once integrated. It does not disappear into perfection. Integration does not mean annihilation. It means recognition, dialogue, and transformation. Your darkness remains, but it becomes conscious, intentional, and creative. It stops dictating your life from the shadows and begins to serve as a source of insight and power. When you meet the shadow fully, you experience what Jung described as wholeness. And wholeness is not peace in the conventional sense. It is not the absence of struggle. Rather, it is the ability to move through life without being unconsciously governed by hidden forces. It is the capacity to feel deeply, think clearly, and act authentically. It is the understanding that your suffering, your mistakes, and your impulses are not flaws to hide, but pieces of a complex mosaic that forms the true self. Consider the liberation of someone who has embraced their shadow. They no longer fear anger, they channel it productively. They no longer fear desire, they align it with purpose. They no longer fear failure, they use it as guidance. Their life is no longer a reaction to hidden forces but a conscious creation, informed by the entirety of their psyche. This is not an abstract ideal. It is the attainable reality of shadow integration. Society resists this truth because it is uncomfortable. To embrace the shadow is to reject shallow morality, to question norms, to confront hypocrisy in oneself and others. It is radical because it dismantles illusions of control and safety, but it is also transformative because it reconnects you with the essential vitality of life, the raw, unfiltered energy that has been exiled by fear and repression. Have you noticed how certain people trigger you instantly? It's not random. The qualities you despise most in others often reflect your unintegrated shadow. The liar who disgusts you might reflect your own hidden deceit. The arrogant person you ridicule might embody the confidence you secretly crave. Every encounter becomes a message from your unconscious, urging you to reclaim what you've disowned. But we don't listen. We drown the messages in distraction, productivity, or positive thinking. We tell ourselves we're fine, while fragments of our psyche scream for recognition. Jung believed that modern man suffers not from lack of meaning, but from lack of soul. And to regain the soul, one must retrieve what was lost in the darkness. The haunting of the shadow, then, is not a curse, it's a summons, a call to wholeness. But before that wholeness can be realized, one must face the cost of ignoring it, because the longer the shadow remains unseen, the more devastating its effects become. When the repressed finally erupts, it doesn't whisper, it consumes. And so, the next question arises: what happens to the individual and to society when the shadow takes control? Imagine a dam holding back a black river. For years, you reinforce it, patching the cracks, pretending the pressure isn't growing. You convince yourself you're safe because the surface looks calm, but beneath, the weight builds. The shadow doesn't disappear, it waits. And one day, the dam breaks. That is what happens when the unconscious takes over. When the shadow overflows the limits of repression, it doesn't return as a whisper, it floods. The eruption may come as an addiction, a breakdown, a scandal, or a sudden moral collapse. It's the respected public figure, caught in hypocrisy. The self-controlled parent, who explodes in rage. The high achiever who wakes one morning and feels an unnameable emptiness pressing down like lead. The event itself looks accidental, but it's not. It's the psyche's rebellion against the false self. Jung warned that what we fail to confront internally, we will encounter externally as fate. When the shadow isn't integrated, it manifests in the world as chaos, personal, relational, or collective. Look around you. The signs are everywhere. The rise of polarization, the epidemic of outrage, the thirst for enemies, these are symptoms of the unacknowledged collective shadow. People no longer debate, they project. The evil they refuse to face within themselves is projected onto the other, a political party, a social group, an ideology. Every argument becomes a mirror war. Every tweet, a confession disguised as condemnation. And what of the individual? The more you repress your anger, the more it disguises itself as anxiety. The more you bury your sadness, the more it hardens into numbness. The more you suppress your desires, the more they resurface as obsessions. Your mind becomes a battlefield between who you think you are and who you actually are. It's not that the shadow wants to destroy you, it wants to wake you up. But awakening feels like death to the false self. Modern psychology has confirmed what Jung intuited a century ago. Repression fragments the psyche. Studies in trauma and neurobiology reveal that when emotions are suppressed, the body keeps score. The brain's limbic system, the seat of emotion and memory, stores unprocessed experiences as if they're still happening. That's why a small trigger can unleash disproportionate rage or fear. The shadow doesn't live only in the mind. It lives in the nervous system. You may tell yourself, "I've moved on," but your body remembers. Your dreams remember. Your unconscious remembers. And the greater the distance between your conscious identity and your buried truths, the more fragile your sense of self becomes. You begin to rely on external validations, success, control, productivity, to hold yourself together. Yet the more you depend on the mask, the emptier you feel beneath it. The psyche becomes an actor trapped in its own performance. Consider the burnout epidemic of the modern age. On the surface, it's a crisis of overwork, but beneath, it's a crisis of authenticity. People are not exhausted because they do too much. They're exhausted because they live too little in truth. Every moment spent pretending drains psychic energy. To deny the shadow is to live divided, and division consumes life force. Nietzsche foresaw this collapse in the modern spirit. He wrote that man, in his pursuit of morality and comfort, has become a sick animal, a being so afraid of chaos that he amputates his instincts, then wonders why he feels lifeless. He kills the God within, then fills the void with ideology, consumption, or distraction. And when distraction fails, despair sets in. The shadow, when ignored, breeds nihilism. It whispers that nothing matters, that all efforts are meaningless. But this isn't truth, it's the revenge of suppressed meaning. You cannot silence the depths of your psyche without silencing your vitality. When you numb your darkness, you numb your light too. That's why so many modern souls drift through life anesthetized, addicted to noise, to scrolling, to constant motion. Stillness becomes unbearable, because stillness reveals the haunting. But even collective systems mirror this repression. Our culture punishes introspection. We treat silence as laziness, solitude as failure, and emotional depth as weakness. We've built economies on avoidance, entertainment industries that distract, consumer markets that promise identity through possessions. Yet beneath the noise, the collective psyche festers. You can see it in the eyes of strangers on the train, in the empty smiles at corporate meetings, in the endless scroll of curated perfection. We've mistaken repression for virtue, numbness for peace. But peace without awareness is only paralysis. When the shadow governs unseen, it distorts love into dependency, morality into judgment, spirituality into ego. We build temples to light, while secretly worshiping what we fear. We condemn others for sins we secretly commit in thought. We fight wars for ideals that mask our hunger for power. The shadow's hand guides it all, unseen yet omnipresent. History itself is a testimony to the shadow unintegrated. Every war, every genocide, every moral panic begins as a projection. A society denies its own cruelty, its own greed, its own lust for control, and so it finds a scapegoat to carry the burden. The witch, the heretic, the foreigner, the dissenter, all crucified so the collective can preserve its illusion of purity. And yet, the more evil we externalize, the closer it grows within us. This is why Jung believed that the fate of humanity depends on the individual's willingness to confront their own shadow. The world will ask you, he wrote, who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you. The world has been telling us for centuries. But what happens when an individual finally stops blaming, stops projecting, and begins to turn inward? What happens when, instead of fighting the darkness, they decide to meet it face to face? That is the rebellion, the moment when consciousness revolts against illusion. It is not a comfortable process. To confront the shadow is to dismantle everything you've built to protect yourself. It is to burn down the false sanctuaries of self-image, to watch the carefully constructed persona dissolve in the flames of truth. But in those ashes lies the beginning of something real. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim power, not the power of domination, but the power of authenticity. It is to walk in the world unmasked. But before that transformation can occur, one must understand what rebellion against the shadow truly means and what it demands of the soul. Imagine standing before a locked door. Behind it lies everything you've hidden, everything you've denied, everything that terrifies you most about yourself. You can hear faint murmurs from the other side, accusations, confessions, the echoes of forgotten desires. The natural instinct is to run, to slam the door shut, and pretend the sound isn't real. But freedom waits on the other side. The key is not avoidance. It is courage. To break free from the shadow is to rebel against a lifetime of self-deception. It is to refuse the easy narratives, the comforting lies, the moral justifications that have kept you divided. This rebellion is not a one-time act. It is a process, a relentless journey into your own depths. It begins with recognition, acknowledging the parts of yourself you have buried, the impulses you have silenced, the darkness you have feared. Jung called this process shadow work. It is not glamorous, nor is it neat. It requires honesty that cuts deeper than any truth you have encountered. It asks, what have you lied about to yourself? What have you condemned in others that lives in you as well? What masks do you wear daily to avoid the glance of your own eyes? Once recognition occurs, reflection follows. You observe your shadow without judgment. You see the anger, the envy, the lust, the selfishness, the cowardice not as enemies, but as parts of a whole. You might feel disgust, shame, or fear. Let them come. These emotions are the raw material of transformation. Each pang, each tremor, each surge of guilt is evidence of life that has been silenced and now seeks integration. Integration, however, demands action. It is not enough to name the shadow. You must engage with it. That might mean confronting behavior, patterns you've ignored, the ways you manipulate, avoid, or escape, the relationships you harm unintentionally, the truths you deny to preserve comfort. The rebel does not hide from discomfort, they cultivate it. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person staring back at you in the mirror isn't entirely you. Their eyes are familiar, but behind them lurks something else, something that doesn't move when you move, doesn't smile when you smile, a silent watcher, a presence that knows your secrets, your fears, your buried impulses. You try to shake it off, to tell yourself it's just your imagination, but deep down, you know it isn't. Single quotes, there is a part of you you've never truly met. You've felt it in those moments when anger erupts before you can stop it, when jealousy twists your chest without reason, when you say something cruel and then wonder who, exactly, spoke through you. You've felt it when you sabotage your own success, when you withdraw from love, when you smile while dying inside. It's the part of you that watches your every move from the dark corners of your psyche. The part Carl Jung called the shadow. Most people spend their lives running from it. They convince themselves they are kind, rational, virtuous. They build entire identities on what they believe they are. Yet beneath that fragile image lies everything they refuse to acknowledge: the selfishness, the rage, the envy, the cowardice, the lust, the fear. The more they deny it, the more power it gains. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is the quiet tragedy of modern humanity. We mistake our own shadow for destiny. Think about it. How many decisions in your life were truly yours? How many of your desires, opinions, or moral convictions were shaped not by your conscious will, but by the unexamined forces beneath? You might think you're acting out of free choice, but what if every move you make is, in truth, a negotiation with the parts of yourself you refuse to see? What if the people you hate the most are merely reflections of the darkness you've exiled within yourself? It's easier to condemn others than to confront the monster in our own hearts. So, we project. We create enemies, scapegoats, ideologies, anything to distract from the uncomfortable truth that the thing we fear most already lives inside us. The tyrant, the coward, the liar, the addict, all potential selves, slumbering just beneath the mask we wear. And yet, here lies the paradox. The very parts we reject are the keys to our wholeness. The emotions we suppress hold our vitality. The impulses we deny contain our creative power. Jung understood that the shadow isn't simply evil, it's raw, untamed energy. It's the life force we've buried under social conditioning, moral guilt, and fear of rejection. By denying it, we don't become pure, we become hollow. But to meet your shadow, you must descend into places you've avoided your entire life. It's not a journey of light, but of darkness, and that is why so few dare to take it. Imagine standing at the edge of your own mind, staring into a vast abyss where all the things you've suppressed whisper your name, your failures, your hidden desires, the lies you've told to survive. You sense that if you step forward, everything you've believed about yourself might collapse. But something deeper, something ancient calls you forward anyway. What if the only way to heal is to walk willingly into the darkness? What if everything you've labeled as bad or sinful isn't an enemy to destroy, but a part of you pleading to be understood? Jung believed that true transformation begins not with self-improvement, but with self-confrontation. Not by striving to become more good, but by embracing the full spectrum of your being, the saint and the sinner, the victim and the aggressor, the light and the shadow. Only then does consciousness expand. Only then can you become truly free. And yet, freedom always comes with a price, because when you meet your shadow, you meet the truth, and the truth rarely flatters. It demands honesty beyond comfort, humility beyond pride, and courage beyond reason. So ask yourself, how much of your life has been shaped by what you refuse to see? And if the shadow has been guiding you all along, what does that make you? The master, or the puppet? The journey into your shadow begins the moment you stop running. But before you can confront it, you must first understand why it exists, how this unseen force was born, and why it still whispers through every thought, every desire, every fear you carry. Because until you understand the roots of the shadow, you will never be free of its grasp. The shadow was not born in darkness. It was cast there piece by piece, moment by moment, as you learned which parts of yourself were acceptable and which were not. As a child, you came into the world whole. You laughed without restraint, cried without shame, reached for what you wanted without fear. But slowly, the light of innocence dimmed. The world began to whisper its conditions for love. Don't be too loud. Good boys don't cry. Nice girls don't get angry. You mustn't fail. And with each command, you hid a fragment of yourself away. You became who you had to be, not who you truly were. Society applauded you for your adaptation. You learned to smile when you were sad, to agree when you disagreed, to fit in when every part of you wanted to stand apart. You called it growing up, but it was really a process of fragmentation. The self you present to the world, the persona, as Jung called, it is the mask you built to survive. And the shadow is everything that mask denies. The more polished the mask, the deeper the shadow grows. This split between who you are and who you pretend to be creates an inner tension and unending psychic war. You feel it in the quiet moments when the mask slips. You feel it in sudden irritations, in compulsions you don't understand, in dreams that disturb you. These are not random. They are messages from the parts of your psyche you've banished. The shadow does not disappear when ignored. It waits, and when the conscious self grows too fragile, it slips through the cracks. That's why Jung didn't see the shadow as an enemy to destroy, but a truth to integrate. To deny it is to live a divided life, to walk as a stranger in your own skin. But why is this division so universal? Why is it almost inevitable that human beings become estranged from themselves? To answer that, we must look deeper beyond personal trauma, into the architecture of the human mind itself. Friedrich Nietzsche once warned that morality, as society defines it, is often the will of the weak disguised as virtue. From childhood, we are conditioned to equate obedience with goodness. To be accepted, we must suppress our primal instincts, the very forces that once ensured survival. Anger, lust, power, ambition, these drives are not inherently evil. They are raw energies of life. But civilization, in its quest for order, demands repression. The result? A species at war with its own nature. Schopenhauer saw this too. He believed human desire was an endless striving, a blind, restless will to live that could never be satisfied. We build entire civilizations to distract ourselves from that discomfort. Religion, routine, consumption, all attempts to tame the inner chaos. Yet every suppression has a cost. The desires we bury become the demons that rule us from below. In Jungian terms, repression is not deletion, it's distortion. What you reject in yourself doesn't vanish. It transforms into shadow content that seeps into your behavior unconsciously. That's why the moralist often becomes the hypocrite, the pacifist, the secret aggressor, the self-proclaimed good person, the silent manipulator. The shadow always finds expression, even if it must wear a disguise. You see this everywhere in modern life. The corporate leader who preaches teamwork, yet thrives on domination. The influencer who advocates authenticity yet hides behind filters. The moral crusader who condemns others for the sins they secretly crave. The shadow doesn't only haunt individuals, it shapes entire cultures. Aldous Huxley warned that the greatest danger of modernity is not tyranny from without, but hypnosis from within. The more we automate, the more we escape into screens, the less we confront the unconscious forces driving us. Our collective shadow grows, enormous, expressing itself in political polarization, addiction, alienation, and the cult of self-image. We live in a civilization that worships the persona. Everything is presentation. Image has become identity. And in this obsession with appearing good, successful, or enlightened, we have exiled the raw, imperfect, living self. The result is a spiritual emptiness that no amount of external validation can fill. Gabor Mate, a modern physician of the psyche, writes that addiction is never about pleasure, it's about pain. Beneath every compulsion lies an attempt to escape an inner wound. But what is that wound if not the rejection of one's own being? We are haunted because we are divided. The shadow doesn't torment us out of malice. It simply wants to be seen. The roots of this haunting stretch deep into the unconscious. Jung likened the psyche to an ancient forest, dense, dark, and filled with forgotten gods. Within that forest lie the instincts of your ancestors, the myths that shaped humanity, the primal fears encoded in your DNA. The shadow is not just personal, it's archetypal. It carries the weight of evolution itself. That's why confronting it feels so terrifying. You're not only facing your own past, but the collective darkness of humankind. Every act of cruelty, every hidden desire, every impulse civilization taught you to condemn, these echo through your soul like ancestral ghosts. And yet, denial doesn't protect you. It only blinds you. When you refuse to acknowledge the shadow, it expresses itself indirectly through projection, judgment, or self-destruction. You see in others what you cannot face in yourself. You fight battles that are really mirrors.